The Quarterly, Joshua, Judges, Ruth. Lesson 11, Judges 17, Micah, the Levite, and the Danites. The book of Judges ends like this. In those days there was no king in the land. Everyone did as seemed right in their own eyes. Judges 21:25. Compare 17:6 and 18:1. This conclusion is only too obvious from a cursory reading of the final 5 chapters of the book of Judges. We've reached the end of the downward cycle of increasingly compromised and compromising leaders, to the point where there are basically no leaders at all. We see the effects of total depravity working themselves out in a people that has totally abandoned God. This section stands outside the downward cycles of the central part of the book of Judges, from 3:7 to 16:31. Yet it brings to a conclusion the 2 central threads from that section. Idolatry, which comes to a head with the founding of the city of Dan in chapters 17 and 18, and sexual immorality, which comes to a head with a reenactment of the sin and destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah inside the borders of Israel itself, in chapters 19 to 21. We have gone from the concerted action of the tribes in holy war in the beginning of Judges 1 to the bitterness of civil war in Judges 20. Israel is discovering the painful outworking of a life committed to false gods. The first of these stories begins with some stolen and cursed silver. 1,100 shekels of silver were stolen from his mother by a man with the impeccably orthodox name of Micah, who is like the Lord. When he returned this hoard, she responded in impeccably orthodox fashion, "Blessed be my son by the Lord." Judges 17:2. But she then proceeded, "I dedicate the silver to the Lord from my hand for my son to make a carved image and a metal image." Now at this point, several of the 10 commandments have already been broken. The son has stolen the silver, commandment number 6, and disrespected his mother, number 5, while the woman has made an idol, number 2. In the next 4 chapters, virtually every one of the 10 commandments will be systematically disregarded by God's people. Micah's mother dedicated 1,100 pieces of silver, but she only used 200 to make the idol. Judges 17:3-4. We're not told whether she reneged on her vow or used the remainder for other religious purposes. The idol was entrusted to Micah's care, and he made an ephod and some idols to go with it, placing his own son in charge of the sanctuary as its priest. Micah was knowledgeable enough in the law of Moses to recognize that an orthodox sanctuary ought to have a Levite priest, and so when the opportunity came to acquire one, he jumped at it. A young Levite was looking for somewhere to stay, and Micah offered him a job. He treated him kindly, like one of his sons, verse 11. However, if Micah now had a priest with an orthodox heredity, he still didn't have an orthodox theology. Rather, he viewed his priest as if he were another idol, a means of ensuring God's blessing upon him, verse 13. At this point, the spotlight turns to a wandering group of Danites. Not content with the land allotted to them by Joshua, they were looking for greener pastures. Judges 18:1. They sent out spies to explore the land, just as Israel had in the book of Numbers, Numbers 13-14. And in their exploring, the spies came to Micah's house and recognized the Levite. Superficially, the questions they asked him are the natural inquiries that are made whenever old friends renew acquaintances. How are you doing? What brings you here? Verse 3. However, the real question, underneath the other questions, is, what's a Levite doing in a place like this, serving idols? To which the Levite gave a straightforward answer. He hired me. Judges 18:4. This priest is a professional who serves for money. The Danites therefore employ his services, asking him to inquire of God whether their trip would be successful. Chapter 18, verse 5. In the early Old Testament period, priests regularly consulted the Lord on behalf of people seeking God's will. Deuteronomy 33:8. However, what the Danites proposed was clearly out of line with God's revealed will. because it involved them departing from the inheritance that the Lord had assigned them. So it shouldn't have been difficult for the priest to give them an answer. However, he told them that the Lord would bless their trip, verse 8. A clear case of taking the Lord's name in vain. There's commandment number 3. Now, if success is the measure of the Lord's approval, then the Danites' trip was certainly approved. They found an unsuspecting people living in a prosperous land with no allies nearby. Judges 18:7. The spies reported back to the rest of the tribe that they had found the promised land to end all promised lands, which God had given into their hands, verse 10. But God had not promised it to them. It was the spies who were saying that God had given it to them, not the narrator, and certainly not God himself. Unlike the Israelites, who were less than enthusiastic about the report their spies brought back concerning the real promised land, the Danites had no hesitation in attacking these defenseless cities. They also stopped on the way to steal an ephod, some household goods, and an idol or two from Micah's house, thereby breaking commandment number 8, you shall not steal, as well as commandment number 2, no graven images, and commandment number 10, you shall not covet. And when the Levite protested the theft, the Danites knew that he was simply a professional doing his job, and so they bought out his contract, offering him the opportunity to be a priest for a tribe rather than a single family. Judges 18:19. And he showed no loyalty to Micah, even though Micah had treated him like a son. Chapter 17:11. And there's commandment number 5, yet again. Micah is a tragicomic figure in this story. He made his own house of gods to hold his illegitimate idols, which were made of stolen and cursed silver, and then hired a passing Levite and said, "Now I know that the Lord will prosper me because I have a Levite as a priest." Judges 17:13. He thought of Israel's God in thoroughly pagan terms, as if the Lord's favor could be purchased through the right rituals. Ironically, it was precisely from that point at which Micah's life started to fall apart. The means of blessing in which he had placed his trust, the idols and the Levite, suddenly took flight and abandoned him, leaving him crying to the Danites, "You take the gods that I made and the priest and go away, and what do I have left?" Judges 18:24. And the answer was, nothing. Having placed his trust in idols, which couldn't walk or talk, but which could be carried off by thieves, and in a priest who could be bought for money, his world fell apart when they were gone. Micah was forsaken by the idols in which he had placed his trust, while the Danites successfully captured the territory of Laish, where they founded the city of Dan, setting up those same idols in their city to be worshipped. Judges 18:30. Moreover, in a major plot twist, the narrator revealed that the previously unnamed Levite was actually a descendant of Moses himself. Judges 18:30. Yet though the Danites might seem to have won by achieving all their objectives, what had they really gained? They'd merely repeated Micah's folly on a much grander scale. Now the idols were doubly stolen. How could anyone take them seriously as cult objects? And who could respect a priesthood, even though it was directly descended from Moses himself, which had been hired for purely financial gain? What blessing could result from this history? Meanwhile, the legitimate house of God with the Ark of the Covenant was located at Shiloh during this whole time. Judges 18:31. One might perhaps expect the Lord to open up the heavens and pour down fire and brimstone on the Danites for their idolatry. We may feel angry at people sinning so boldly and yet getting away with it. But were they really getting away with it? God has two different ways of dealing with those who scorn him in this world. One is the route that Samson found himself on, the road to earthly punishment that fits the crime. The other is the way of the Danites, the smooth, broad road of earthly success, which leads gently down to destruction. Is the way of the Danites really to be preferred? Is there not more hope for those who, like Samson, find their earthly comfort snatched away? They at least have cause to cry out to God. In prison, their hair may begin to grow back and their strength may be somewhat restored. But the Danites were bound in golden chains, condemned by their own comforts to their own ultimate destruction, which is ominously hinted at in the phrase, the captivity of the land, in Judges 18:30. Application questions. 1. The days of the Judges were days of great religious confusion in Israel. Where do you see similar confusion about worship issues in the contemporary church? 2. Micah put his trust in his Levite priest. The Danites put their trust in their own ability to find a promised land for themselves. What people or things are we tempted to put our trust in apart from the living God? 3. How can we encourage our leaders to stay true to ministry rather than serving for financial gain? 4. Who do you think was really better off, Samson or the Danites? Why?